The ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each one worth more than I'd ever see in a year. White roses cascaded from every surface, their perfume mixing with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne. I tugged at the hem of my dress, a simple black number I'd bought on sale 3 months ago, hoping it would be appropriate for my sister's wedding. Looking around at the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, I realized I might as well have worn a potato sack. "Maya!" a familiar voice called out, and I turned to see my cousin Jennifer approaching, her smile bright but her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. "You look nice." Very understated. Understated. The polite way of saying cheap. "Thanks, Jen." "Beautiful ceremony," I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. And it had been beautiful, in the way that unlimited budgets and wedding planners could make things beautiful. My sister Sophia had looked like a princess stepping out of a fairy tale, her dress a masterpiece of silk and lace that probably cost more than my car. Oh, absolutely. Though I have to say the reception is going to be even more spectacular. Did you see the ice sculpture? And the 7-course meal, plus the chocolate fountain and the dessert bar? Jennifer's voice faded as my attention drifted to the head table where Sophia sat with her new husband, Marcus, and their wedding party. She looked radiant, laughing at something Marcus whispered in her ear. For a moment my heart swelled with genuine happiness for her. Despite everything, the years of growing apart, the gradual shift in our relationship as her career soared and mine plateaued, she was my sister, my only sister, and she was happy. But then our eyes met across the room. I smiled and raised my hand in a small wave, expecting her to smile back, maybe even mouth a quick "thank you for coming," or blow me a kiss like she used to when we were kids. Instead, her expression remained neutral, almost blank, before she turned away to respond to someone else at her table. The snub hit me like a physical blow. I felt my cheeks burn and quickly looked down at my hands, pretending to fidget with my clutch. Maybe she hadn't seen me. Maybe she was just distracted by her wedding day duties. Maybe I was being oversensitive. "Maya?" Jennifer was still talking, and I realized I'd completely zoned out. "I asked if you were planning to stay for the after party. There's going to be a DJ and dancing until 2 in the morning. "Oh, I'm not sure yet," I mumbled, still shaken by Sophia's dismissal. "We'll see how the evening goes." Jennifer's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with relief. "Oh, I have to go find my husband." "Catch up with you later!" She hurried away, leaving me standing alone in the middle of the opulent ballroom. I made my way to my assigned table, number 18, which was tucked away in what I was beginning to recognize as the budget relatives section. The other guests at my table were distant cousins I barely knew, plus Mrs. Henderson from down the street, who had watched Sophia and me grow up. At least she seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Maya, dear, you look lovely," she said, patting the seat next to her. "How have you been? Still working at the clinic?" "Yes, still there," I answered, grateful for her warm demeanor. "4 years now. I really love what I do." "That's wonderful. Not everyone can say that about their job. You should be proud, helping people, making a difference. Much more meaningful than some of these corporate jobs, if you ask me." She gestured vaguely toward the front of the room, where most of Sophia's new in-laws and colleagues were seated. As the evening progressed, I watched my sister from afar. She floated from table to table, gracious and glowing, accepting congratulations and well wishes. She spent long minutes chatting with Marcus's family, laughing with her college friends, posing for photos with her co-workers. But she never once approached my table, never once caught my eye again. During the father-daughter dance, I found myself tearing up despite everything. Dad looked so proud, so happy, spinning Sophia around the dance floor while she laughed. He'd taught us both to dance in our living room when we were little, standing on his feet while he waltzed us around to old songs on the radio. The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell his aftershave, feel the scratch of his 5 o'clock shadow when he'd lean down to kiss our foreheads. After Dad died 3 years ago, Sophia and I had clung to each other during those first awful months, We'd planned the funeral together, cleaned out his house together, cried together over boxes of his belongings. I thought we'd grown closer through our shared grief, but somewhere along the way, as she threw herself into her career and I struggled to find my footing after losing my job, we drifted apart again. The speeches began, and I listened as Marcus's best man told charming stories about their college days and business school adventures. Sophia's maid of honor, her roommate from Harvard, spoke eloquently about their friendship and Sophia's determination to succeed. Person after person stood up to toast the happy couple, sharing memories and inside jokes that made everyone laugh. I waited for someone to mention our childhood, our family, the way Sophia used to protect me from bullies at school, or how she'd help me with my homework every night for years. But those stories never came. It was as if the first 18 years of her life, the years she'd shared with me, had been erased, replaced entirely by this new, more sophisticated version of herself. As the evening wore on and the champagne flowed, I felt increasingly invisible. Conversations happened around me but rarely included me. When I tried to join in, there would be a polite pause, a few murmured acknowledgements, and then the discussion would seamlessly shift back to topics I knew nothing about. Expensive vacations, private schools for children I didn't know existed, investment strategies and stock portfolios. I was contemplating making an early exit when I overheard my name mentioned at the table behind me. Two women I didn't recognize were speaking in low voices, but in the way that people do when they think they're being discreet, but actually want to be overheard. "I just think it's odd that she's here," one of them was saying. "I mean, I understand she's family, but look at this crowd, look at this venue. It's not exactly her level." "Sophia mentioned her sister works at some kind of clinic or something," the other replied. "Medical field, but not a doctor. A technician maybe, or a receptionist?" "Well, that explains the dress," the first woman said with a soft laugh. "And did you see where they seated her? Poor thing probably can't even afford to bring a date to something like this." My cheeks burned with humiliation. I wanted to turn around and tell them that I was a licensed physical therapist, that I helped people recover from injuries and surgeries, that my work mattered even if it didn't come with a six-figure salary. I wanted to explain that I'd chosen to work at a community clinic because I believed in accessible healthcare, not because I couldn't find anything better. But I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap, as they continued their assessment of my life and worthiness to be there. "I heard she's been having a hard time since their father died," one of them continued. "Sophia mentioned something about family drama and Maya being difficult about the inheritance." That was a lie. There had been no drama about Dad's modest inheritance. We'd split everything equally, and I'd never questioned any of Sophia's decisions about his house or belongings. But apparently, that's how she'd chosen to characterize our growing distance to her new social circle. "Well, I suppose Sophia had to invite her," the other woman concluded, "but you can tell she's not comfortable with it. Did you notice how she's avoided that whole section of the room all evening?" So I hadn't imagined it. Sophia had been deliberately avoiding me, and it was obvious enough that strangers had noticed. The realization settled in my stomach like a stone. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of clinking silverware and forced smiles. I picked at my salmon, which probably cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week, while conversations swirled around me about vacation homes in the Hamptons and children's private tennis lessons. Mrs. Henderson tried to include me, bless her heart, but even she seemed to sense the awkward energy at our table. When the dancing began, I watched from my seat as Sophia and Marcus took the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together like they'd been choreographed, which they probably had been. Everything about this wedding screamed professional planning and unlimited budget. From the live orchestra to the elaborate floral arrangements that would probably be thrown away tomorrow. I thought about my own dreams of marriage, shelved indefinitely after my last relationship ended 8 months ago. David had been a good man, a teacher, like I'd once wanted to be, but our relationship had fizzled under the weight of financial stress and my growing isolation from my own family. He'd never understood why I didn't just ask Sophia for help when I was struggling, why I worked extra shifts at the clinic instead of accepting what he called obvious family support. How could I explain that the help came with strings I wasn't willing to pull? That every time Sophia had offered assistance over the past few years, it came with subtle suggestions about how I could improve my situation. Go back to school, network more, consider a career change, move to a better neighborhood. She meant well, I knew that, but her help always felt like judgment wrapped in expensive paper. The music shifted to more upbeat songs, and couples began joining the newlyweds on the dance floor. I watched Marcus's teenage nephews awkwardly ask elderly aunts to dance, saw Sophia's college friends forming a giggling circle as they attempted to recreate moves from their sorority days. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for simpler times, when Sophia and I would dance around our childhood bedroom to whatever was playing on the radio, not caring how we looked or who was watching. Would you like to dance? I looked up to see a man about my age standing beside my chair. He was pleasant-looking, with kind eyes and a slightly nervous smile. I glanced around, certain he must be talking to someone else, but he was definitely addressing me. "Oh, I'm not much of a dancer," I stammered, suddenly self-conscious about my simple dress and discount shoes. "Neither am I," he admitted with a laugh. "But I figured we could be terrible together. I'm James, by the way. Marcus's cousin." "Maya," I replied, accepting his offered hand. "Sophia's sister." "Ah, the famous sister. I've heard so much about you." I doubted that was true, but I appreciated the lie. As we made our way to the dance floor, I caught sight of Sophia watching us from across the room. For just a moment, her perfectly composed expression flickered with something that might have been surprise or annoyance or something else entirely. Then she turned back to her conversation with Marcus's parents, dismissing me once again. James was a surprisingly good dance partner, patient with my rusty skills and genuinely funny. He told me about his work as a librarian, his passion for restoring old books, and his hobby of growing heirloom tomatoes in his backyard garden. It was refreshing to talk to someone who wasn't trying to impress me with their success or status. "So, you're a physical therapist?" he asked as we swayed to a slower song. "That must be incredibly rewarding work." "It is," I said, meaning it. "I love helping people regain their mobility and independence. It's not glamorous, but it matters." "The most important work rarely is glamorous," he replied. "My grandmother was a physical therapist. She used to say that healing hands were worth more than golden ones." I felt tears prick my eyes at the unexpected kindness of his words. It had been so long since someone had acknowledged the value of what I did without immediately following it up with suggestions for how I could do better or aim higher. We danced through several more songs, and I found myself actually enjoying the evening for the first time. James had a way of making me feel seen and appreciated, like my presence at this opulent celebration wasn't just tolerated, but welcomed. When the band announced they were taking a break, he walked me back to my table and lingered for a moment. "I hope we can dance again later," he said. "This has been the highlight of my evening." After he left, I sat in the afterglow of genuine human connection, feeling more like myself than I had all day. Maybe the evening wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. Maybe I could find a way to enjoy my sister's wedding, despite the awkwardness and perceived snubs. That fragile optimism lasted exactly 12 minutes. I had gotten up to use the restroom, navigating the maze of tables and chattering guests, when I passed behind a cluster of women standing near the bar. I recognized Sophia's maid of honor, her voice carrying clearly over the ambient noise. "I just feel so bad for Sophia having to deal with all this family drama on her wedding day," she was saying to the small group gathered around her. "She's been so stressed about it." "What do you mean?" asked one of the other bridesmaids, a blonde woman whose dress probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Well, you know how it is with families. There's always someone who—" She paused dramatically, lowering her voice just enough to create intimacy while ensuring she could still be overheard. Let's just say not everyone handles success the same way. Some people get bitter instead of being supportive. My blood ran cold. They were talking about me. They had to be. "Oh, you mean the sister?" the blonde woman asked. I wondered about that. She seemed so different from Sophia. "And did you see where they seated her?" Sophia tried to be diplomatic about it, but honestly, she doesn't really belong here. The maid of honor continued. "This isn't her world, you know, and she's been making things difficult for Sophia ever since their father died. Jealousy issues, financial resentment, that sort of thing." "That's so sad," another voice chimed in. "Sophia's such a generous person. I'm sure she's tried to help." "Oh, she has. But some people just can't accept help gracefully. They'd rather play the victim than actually improve their situation." I stood frozen behind them, feeling like I'd been slapped. Every word was a twisted version of our reality, painting me as the bitter, jealous sister who couldn't handle Sophia's success. The woman speaking had never met me before tonight, had never heard my side of any story, yet she felt qualified to judge my character and my relationship with my sister. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach clench with nausea, was the realization that these weren't her own conclusions. Someone had given her this narrative. Someone had described me as bitter, jealous, and ungrateful. Someone had explained why I didn't belong at this celebration. And there was only one person who could have been the source of that information. "Well, at least it's just for one night," the maid of honor concluded. "After this, Sophia can focus on her new life without all the family baggage weighing her down." I turned and walked away as quickly as I could without running, my chest tight with the effort of holding back tears. The bathroom suddenly seemed too far away, the crowd too thick, the air too thin. I pushed through the French doors onto a balcony overlooking the hotel's manicured gardens, gasping for breath in the cool night air. The sounds of the party continued behind me. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses raised in celebration. But I felt completely separate from it all, like I was watching someone else's life through a window. The sister who had been excluded, dismissed, and apparently discussed in terms that made me sound like a burden to be endured rather than family to be loved. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number for a taxi service. It was time to go home, time to stop pretending I belonged in this golden cage of wealth and sophistication where my presence was merely tolerated out of obligation. But as I was about to dial, I heard the French doors open behind me. "Maya, are you okay?" I turned to see James approaching, his face creased with concern. "I saw you leave pretty quickly. Did something happen?" For a moment I considered lying, making up some excuse about needing air or feeling tired. But the genuine worry in his eyes broke down my defenses. I overheard some people talking about me," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "About how I don't belong here, about how I'm jealous of Sophia and making her life difficult." James's expression darkened. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter," I said quickly. "They're not wrong, really. Look around. This isn't my world. I work at a community clinic, I drive a 10-year-old Honda, and I bought this dress at Target. I don't vacation in Europe or send my non-existent children to private schools. I don't belong here." "That's ridiculous," James said firmly. "You belong anywhere your family is celebrating. You belong anywhere people should be grateful to have you." His words were kind, but they couldn't erase what I'd heard. They couldn't change the fact that my own sister had apparently described me to her friends as a burden, a source of drama, someone to be endured rather than embraced. "I think I'm going to head home," I said, clutching my phone. "I don't want to make things awkward for Sophia on her wedding day." "Maya, wait," James said, reaching out to gently touch my arm. "Don't let them drive you away. Don't let them win." But as I looked back through the French doors at the glittering party inside, at my sister laughing with people who had never known her as anything but successful and sophisticated, I realized it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about accepting a truth I'd been avoiding for years. My sister and I had grown into strangers, and maybe that was okay. Maybe some relationships weren't meant to survive the weight of time and change and different choices. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. I didn't call the taxi. Something in James's words, or maybe just the stubborn streak I'd inherited from Dad, made me decide to stay. If Vi was going to be talked about as the bitter, jealous sister anyway, I might as well be present for it. Besides, running away would only confirm what they already believed about me, that I couldn't handle being in their world. James walked back inside with me, staying close enough that I felt supported, but not hovering in a way that would draw attention. The party had shifted into full swing. The dance floor was packed, and the bar was doing steady business. I found myself scanning the crowd differently now, wondering how many of these people had been part of conversations about me. How many knew the narrative of the troubled sister who couldn't be happy for Sophia's success? Mrs. Henderson waved me over to our table, where she was sitting with her slice of wedding cake, a towering creation that probably cost more than some people's monthly car payments. "There you are, dear. I was wondering if you'd gone home already. This cake is divine. You simply must try a piece." I sat down beside her, grateful for her uncomplicated warmth. "Just needed some air," I said, accepting the fork she offered. The cake was indeed delicious, layers of vanilla and raspberry with buttercream that melted on my tongue. "Beautiful wedding," Mrs. Henderson continued, "though I have to say it's quite different from what your mother would have planned." The mention of Mum hit me unexpectedly. She died when Sophia and I were in college, and I'd always wondered what she would have thought of the path Sophia's life had taken. Mom had valued kindness over success, connection over achievement. She would have loved that Sophia was happy, but I think she would have been puzzled by some of the choices that led to this glittering, impersonal celebration. Mom always said she wanted us to be happy, but more than that, she wanted us to be good to each other, I said quietly. Mrs. Henderson nodded knowingly. "Family is complicated, especially when people grow in different directions. But love finds a way, dear. It always finds a way." I wished I shared her optimism, but sitting in this ballroom where I felt so clearly out of place, where my own sister had avoided me all evening, it was hard to believe that love was enough to bridge the gap that had opened between us. The evening progressed, with more dancing, more champagne, and more conversations that I was adjacent to, but not really part of. I found myself watching Sophia more carefully now, noting how she moved through the crowd with practiced grace, how she seemed to know exactly what to say to each person, how she navigated the complex social dynamics of her new life with apparent ease. It was impressive, honestly. She had built herself into someone who belonged in rooms like this, someone who could command attention and respect in circles I'd never even dreamed of entering. Part of me was genuinely proud of her achievements, even if they came at the cost of the closeness we'd once shared. Around 10 o'clock, as the party was winding down to its more intimate after-party phase, I made my way to the restroom one final time before calling it a night. I was touching up my lipstick in the mirror when I heard familiar voices from the lounge area just outside the bathroom door. "Honestly, I think it went better than expected," Sophia was saying. "I was worried it would be more awkward." "You handled it perfectly," came the reply, her maid of honor again. "Very gracious. No one could tell you were uncomfortable. I just feel bad, you know. But what was I supposed to do? Pretend everything is fine when it's not?" My heart began to race. They were talking about me again, but this time it was Sophia herself. "You can't help it if she chooses to be bitter," the maid of honor continued. "You've tried to maintain a relationship, but some people just can't handle other people's success. It's been so hard since Dad died," Sophia said, and I could hear real sadness in her voice. "She's been so angry with me, like it's my fault that my career took off while she's still struggling. I've offered to help, but she's too proud to accept it, and then she makes me feel guilty for being happy, for achieving my goals." I pressed my back against the bathroom door, my hands shaking. This was how she saw our relationship, me as the angry, jealous sister who resented her success and made her feel guilty for being happy. The thing is, Sophia continued, I love her. She's my sister, and I'll always love her. But I can't keep letting her negativity affect my life. Marcus and I are building something together, and I need to focus on that. I need to surround myself with people who support me and celebrate with me, not people who make me feel bad for being successful. That's completely understandable, her friend assured her. You have to protect your own happiness. I invited her tonight because I had to. She's family. But honestly, I think this might be the last time. I can't keep including her in my life if she's going to bring this kind of energy to everything. It's not fair to Marcus or to our future children. The words hit me like a physical blow. She was cutting me out, not just avoiding me at the wedding, but actually planning to exclude me from her future life entirely. I was going to lose my sister, not to death or distance, but to a deliberate choice she was making to remove me from her world. I heard their voices moving away, and I waited several minutes before emerging from the bathroom, my legs unsteady beneath me. The party was continuing around me, but I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distorted. I made it back to my table and gathered my small purse, moving mechanically. Mrs. Henderson had gone home, and the other guests at my table were either dancing or had left for the evening. I was alone with my thoughts and the crushing weight of what I'd just learned. Maya? I looked up to see James approaching, his face concerned again. Are you leaving? Yes, I managed to say. It's been a long day. He studied my face for a moment, clearly seeing more than I wanted to reveal. Can I walk you out or give you a ride if you need one? I was about to decline, to insist I was fine, when something in his kind expression broke through my defenses. Actually, yes, I'd appreciate that. We made our way through the thinning crowd toward the exit. I caught sight of Sophia one last time, laughing with Marcus and his family, her face radiant with happiness. She looked like she belonged exactly where she was, surrounded by people who understood her world and shared her values. And maybe that was okay. Maybe we had simply grown into different people who wanted different things from life. Maybe the problem wasn't that she was excluding me, but that I was trying to hold on to a version of our relationship that no longer existed. Outside the hotel, James hailed a taxi and gave the driver my address. As we settled into the back seat, he turned to me with genuine concern. Do you want to talk about what happened in there? I considered lying again, maintaining the facade that everything was fine, but I was tired of pretending, tired of trying to fit into spaces where I wasn't wanted. I overheard my sister talking to her friends, I said quietly, about me, about how I'm bitter and jealous and make her feel guilty for being successful, about how she's planning to cut me out of her life because I bring negative energy to everything. James was quiet for a moment, processing this information. And is that true? Are you bitter about her success? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected sympathy, not analysis. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe sometimes. Not because I don't want her to be happy, but because I miss her. I miss the sister I grew up with, the one who used to call me every day and include me in her plans. Now I feel like I'm watching her life from the outside, like I'm not good enough to be part of it anymore. That sounds more like grief than jealousy, James observed gently. He was right. I wasn't angry that Sophia was successful. I was mourning the loss of our closeness, the gradual realization that we'd grown into people who no longer really knew each other. The bitter irony was that by trying to hold on to our old relationship, I'd pushed her further away. I think maybe she's right, I said, surprised by my own words. Maybe I have been bringing negativity to her life. Not intentionally, but maybe my sadness about how things changed between us has made me someone she doesn't want to be around. The taxi pulled up to my apartment building, a modest complex that was clean and safe, but worlds away from the luxury Sophia now inhabited. James walked me to my door, and I found myself reluctant to say goodbye to perhaps the only person all evening who had made me feel valued. Thank you, I said, fumbling with my keys. For the dances, for listening, for seeing me tonight. Maya, he said gently. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. If your sister can't appreciate who you are, that's her loss, not a reflection of your worth. After he left, I sat in my small living room, still wearing my wedding attire, processing the evening's revelations. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. It was a far cry from the opulent ballroom I'd just left, but it was mine. It was real. It was a life I'd built through my own choices and values. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit into Sophia's world and start embracing my own. I woke up the next morning with a headache that had nothing to do with champagne and everything to do with the emotional whiplash of the previous evening. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, highlighting the black dress I'd draped over my chair. A stark reminder of how the night had unfolded. My phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 2 text messages. The first was from James, who had apparently gotten my number from the hotel's guest list. Thank you for a lovely evening. I hope you're doing okay this morning. Would love to take you to dinner sometime if you're interested. The second message was from Sophia, sent at 2:47 a.m. Maya, I saw you left early. Hope you had a good time. Thank you for coming. The casual tone of her text felt surreal after everything I'd overheard. But then again, she had no idea I'd been eavesdropping on her conversations. As far as she knew, I'd simply attended her wedding and left at a reasonable hour, playing my part as the obligatory family member who needed to be included but not necessarily embraced. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, staring out at the courtyard of my apartment complex. A few neighbors were already out walking their dogs or heading to weekend errands, living their normal, unglamorous lives. It struck me that 6 months ago, I might have felt embarrassed by the simplicity of my surroundings compared to Sophia's world. Today, it just felt honest. My phone rang, interrupting my contemplation. It was my mother's best friend, Carol, who had been like a second mother to Sophia and me after Mom died. Maya, honey, how was the wedding? She asked, her voice warm with genuine interest. It was beautiful, I said automatically, then paused. Actually, Carol, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you think I've been bitter about Sophia's success, jealous or resentful in a way that makes me difficult to be around? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Oh, honey, what happened at the wedding? I found myself telling her everything, the snubs, the overheard conversations, the realization that Sophia planned to gradually exclude me from her life. Carol listened without interruption, making small sounds of sympathy at the appropriate moments. You know, she said when I finished, your mother used to worry about this. About what? About how you and Sophia would navigate your differences as adults. She loved you both so much, but she recognized that you were very different people, even as children. Sophia was always ambitious, always reaching for the next achievement. You were more grounded, I suppose, more interested in connection than conquest. Mom was worried we'd grow apart. She was worried that Sophia might mistake your contentment for lack of ambition, and that you might mistake her ambition for rejection of family values. She used to say that you two needed to learn to love each other's differences instead of judging them. The words hit me with unexpected clarity. I think I have been judging her, I admitted. Maybe not consciously, but I've been assuming that her success meant she'd become shallow, or that she'd forgotten what really mattered. And maybe she's been assuming that my choices meant I was stuck or bitter. People grow, Maya. Sometimes they grow in directions we don't expect or understand. That doesn't mean the love disappears, but it might mean the relationship needs to change. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the morning in reflection. I thought about the version of events Sophia had shared with her friends, that I was angry and resentful, that I made her feel guilty for being successful. While I didn't recognize myself in that description, I could see how my sadness about our growing distance might have come across as judgment or bitterness. I thought about the times she'd offered help that I'd refused, how my pride might have seemed like rejection to her. I thought about the way I'd mentally criticized her choices, the expensive wedding, the luxury lifestyle, the friends who seemed to value status over substance. Had I been as judgmental as I accused her of being? Around noon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I got dressed in jeans and a comfortable sweater, got in my car, and drove to Sophia's house. She and Marcus had likely just returned from their wedding night at the hotel, and I knew I was risking an awkward encounter. But I needed to have this conversation while I still had the courage. Their house was in an upscale neighborhood about 20 minutes from my apartment, a beautiful colonial with perfectly manicured landscaping. I'd been there only once before, shortly after they'd bought it, and I'd spent most of that visit feeling intimidated by the expensive furnishings and artwork. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. Marcus answered, still looking a bit tired but gracious as always. "Maya, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in. Sophia's in the kitchen making brunch." I followed him through the elegant living room to a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, all granite countertops and professional-grade appliances. Sophia was standing at the stove, in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun, looking more like the sister I remembered from our childhood than she had all night at the wedding. "Maya," she turned with surprise, her expression uncertain. "Is everything okay?" "I was hoping we could talk," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "If you have time." Marcus, bless him, immediately made himself scarce. "I'll be in my office catching up on some emails," he said, kissing Sophia's cheek. "Nice to see you, Maya." After he left, Sophia and I stood in awkward silence for a moment. She turned back to the stove, flipping what looked like gourmet pancakes. "How are you feeling today?" I asked. "Not too exhausted from last night?" "Tired, but happy?" she said, not looking at me. "It was everything I hoped it would be. It was beautiful, Sophia. Really, I'm happy for you." She glanced at me then, as if trying to gauge my sincerity. "Thank you. I'm glad you were there." I took a deep breath. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about. About me being there. And about us. She turned off the burner and leaned against the counter, crossing her arms defensively. "Maya, if this is about the seating arrangement or—" "I overheard you last night," I interrupted gently. "Talking to your friends about me, about how I'm bitter and jealous and how you're planning to distance yourself from me." The color drained from her face. "Maya, Let me finish, please." I held up my hand. "I also overheard your friends talking about how I don't belong in your world, how I'm some kind of burden you have to tolerate out of family obligation." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't deny it. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "I know, but I did, and honestly, I'm glad I did because it made me realize some things I needed to face." She looked at me warily, as if expecting an attack or emotional breakdown. "The thing is," I continued, "I think you're both right and wrong. Right that I've been struggling with how much we've changed, how different our lives have become, but wrong about why." "What do you mean?" I moved closer, leaning against the kitchen island across from her. "I haven't been jealous of your success, Sophia. I've been grieving the loss of our closeness. I've been sad that we don't really know each other anymore, that I feel like a stranger in your life, Maya. And I think maybe my sadness has come across as judgment or resentment, even though that's not what I meant. When you offered to help me financially, I turned you down, not because I was too proud, but because I was afraid accepting help would make me feel even more like a charity case in your life." Sophia's tears spilled over. "You're not a charity case. You're my sister." "Am I though, really?" I asked, not unkindly. When was the last time we talked about something that mattered to both of us? When was the last time you asked about my life because you genuinely wanted to know, not because you felt obligated?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, her face crumbling. "The truth is," I continued, "we've grown into different people who want different things from life, and that's okay. It doesn't make either of us wrong or bad, it just makes us different." "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "You haven't lost me, but you can't keep me either, not the way I used to be. The sister you grew up with, who shared your dreams and understood your world, she doesn't exist anymore. Just like the sister I grew up with, who told me everything and made me feel like I mattered in her life. She's changed too. Sophia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So what are you saying? That we just give up on each other? I'm saying maybe we need to figure out how to love each other as we are now, instead of mourning who we used to be. She was quiet for a long moment, processing my words. Then she said, I told Amanda last night that I was thinking of not including you in future events, that it was too hard to have you there when you seemed so unhappy. I was unhappy, I admitted, but not because of your success. I was unhappy because I felt like I was watching your life from the outside, like I didn't matter to you anymore. You do matter to me, she said fiercely. You matter so much it scares me. When I see you struggling, when I see you working so hard at that clinic for so little money, living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car, it makes me want to fix everything for you. But then, when you won't let me help, it makes me feel like you're rejecting not just my help, but me. And when you offer help, it makes me feel like you think my life is broken and needs fixing, I countered, like the choices I've made aren't valid because they don't look like success to you. We stared at each other across the kitchen, both of us crying now, both of us finally saying things we'd been thinking for years. I love my job, I said quietly. I know it doesn't pay much, and I know I'll never be able to afford a house like this or take vacations to Europe. But I help people every day. I make a difference in their lives, and that matters to me more than money or status. I know that, Sophia said, and I'm proud of you for it. I worry about you, about your future, about what happens when you get older and need more security. And I worry about you too, I admitted. I worry that you're so focused on achieving and acquiring that you're missing out on the simple joys of life. I worry that you're surrounded by people who only value you for what you can do for them or how you make them look. She flinched at that, and I realized I'd hit closer to home than I'd intended. Some of your friends last night, I continued carefully, they didn't seem to know you very well. They knew your achievements and your status, but when they talked about you, it was all surface-level stuff. It made me sad because I remember when you had friends who knew your heart, not just your resume. Things change when you get older, she said defensively. Adult friendships are different. They don't have to be, I said. I still have friends from college who know me completely, who care about my struggles and celebrate my small victories. They're not impressed by my lack of money or status. They value me for who I am. Sophia was quiet, considering this. Like that guy you were dancing with last night? He seemed really genuine. James. Yeah, he was nice, but Sophia, the point isn't about specific people. The point is that somewhere along the way we stopped seeing each other clearly. You started seeing me as someone who needed fixing, and I started seeing you as someone who had forgotten what mattered. So how do we fix this? She asked. How do we find our way back to each other? I thought about Carol's words, about our mother's hopes for us. Maybe we start by accepting that we don't have to be the same to love each other. Maybe we stop trying to change each other and start trying to understand each other. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. Neither do I said, but maybe we could start small. Maybe instead of you offering to help me with my problems, you could just ask me about my life. And maybe instead of me judging your choices, I could try to understand why they make you happy. She nodded slowly. I'd like that. I'd like to know more about your work, about what makes you passionate about it. And maybe you could help me figure out which of my friendships are real and which ones are just convenient. It wasn't a magic solution. It wasn't going to erase years of growing apart or instantly bridge the gap between our different worlds. But it felt like a beginning, like the first honest conversation we'd had in years. There's something else, I said. I think we need to accept that our relationship is going to look different than it used to. We're not going to be each other's primary person anymore. We both have other relationships, other priorities, and that's okay. But we can still be sisters, she said hopefully. We'll always be sisters, I confirmed. We just need to figure out what that means for us now as adults with different lives. She came around the island and hugged me then, a real hug that felt like coming home. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't belong at my wedding. I'm sorry for talking about you like you were a problem to be solved." "I'm sorry too," I said, "for judging your choices, for being sad instead of celebratory about your happiness, for making you feel like you had to choose between your success and our relationship." When we pulled apart, we were both smiling through our tears. "So," she said, wiping her face, "want some pancakes? They're probably cold now, but I can make fresh ones." "I'd love that," I said. "And maybe you could tell me about your honeymoon plans. Not because I'm judging them, but because I want to share in your excitement. And maybe you could tell me about that guy you were dancing with," she said with a grin that reminded me of the sister I'd grown up with. "He seemed very interested in getting to know you better." As we worked together to make fresh pancakes, talking and laughing in a way we hadn't in years, I realized that sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to stop trying to save it and start trying to understand it. We weren't going to be the sisters we used to be, but maybe we could become the sisters we were meant to be, different but connected, separate but still family. It was a beginning, and sometimes that's enough. The community center gym was packed with families, the kind of controlled chaos that comes with a dozen kids' birthday party. I was sitting on the floor with 8-year-old Marcus Jr. Yes, Sophia had named her stepson after his father, helping him figure out how to make his new remote control car navigate around the obstacle course we'd set up with folding chairs and pool noodles. "Aunt Maya, it keeps going the wrong way," he complained, his face scrunched in concentration. "Try smaller movements with the joystick," I suggested, demonstrating. "Sometimes when we try to control too much at once, everything goes sideways." It was advice I'd been learning to apply to more than just toy cars. "Maya," Sophia called from across the gym, where she was coordinating a game of musical chairs with impressive efficiency. "Can you help me with the cake situation? I think I ordered too much." I laughed, getting up from the floor. "There's no such thing as too much cake at a kid's party, Soph." The nickname slipped out naturally, the way it used to when we were young. We'd been working on our relationship for 6 months now, having awkward coffee dates and tentative phone calls, slowly learning how to be sisters again. It wasn't the same as it used to be. We were both different people now, but it was real in a way that felt sustainable. True to our conversation in her kitchen that morning after the wedding, we'd stopped trying to fix each other and started trying to understand each other. Sophia had visited my clinic, meeting my patients and colleagues, finally seeing firsthand why I loved my work. I'd attended one of her company's charity galas, watching her in her element, beginning to understand how she'd built her professional success through genuine skill and dedication, not just luck or connections. We still had our differences. She still worried about my financial security, and I still sometimes felt overwhelmed by the complexity of her social obligations. But we'd learned to talk about these things openly instead of letting them fester into resentment. "How's everything going with James?" she asked as we arranged the birthday cake, an elaborate dinosaur creation that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. But hey, it was Marcus Jr.'s birthday, and he was obsessed with paleontology. "Good," I said, unable to suppress a smile. "Really good, actually. He's coming to dinner on Sunday. Want to meet him properly this time?" "I'd love that." Marcus has been curious about him since the wedding. He said James seemed like good people. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The fact that my boyfriend was welcome in her home, that she wanted to know him not just as a polite obligation, but out of genuine interest. Just like it mattered that she'd started asking about my patients by name, remembering details about their progress from week to week. "Aunt Maya!" Marcus Jr. came running over, his remote control car finally cooperating. "Look, I got it to go around all the chairs without crashing." "Excellent driving," I told him seriously. "You've got the patience for it now." Sophia smiled, watching the interaction. "You're really good with him," she said quietly. "He adores you. He's a great kid." You and Marcus are doing something right." The party continued with typical kid energy: games, sugar crashes, minor meltdowns, and the kind of joy that only comes from being 8 years old and surrounded by friends. I found myself genuinely enjoying it, not just enduring it out of family obligation. As we were cleaning up afterward, Sophia and I worked side by side, stacking chairs and throwing away paper plates. "Maya," she said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." My heart jumped a little. Old habits from our years of tension. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's right. Marcus and we're thinking about having a baby." The announcement hit me with unexpected emotion. 6 months ago, this would have been another milestone in her life that I felt excluded from, another achievement that highlighted the differences in our paths. Today, it just felt like wonderful news about my sister's happiness. "Sophia, that's amazing," I said, pulling her into a hug. "How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh, "but excited too, and I was hoping maybe you could help me figure out some things about pregnancy, about babies. I know you work with a lot of new mothers in your physical therapy practice." The request was simple, but it represented something huge. She was asking for my expertise, valuing my knowledge, wanting me to be part of this important journey in her life. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to help however I can. And maybe," she continued, looking a bit nervous, "maybe you could be the baby's godmother. If you want to, I mean. I know it's a big responsibility, and I understand if—" "Yes," I interrupted, tears springing to my eyes. "Yes, absolutely yes." We hugged again, both of us crying a little, both of us laughing at how emotional we'd become. "I was so worried about asking," she said. "I thought maybe you'd think I was just trying to obligate you or something. 6 months ago I might have," I admitted, "but not now. Now I'm just honored that you want me to be part of your child's life. I want you to be part of all of it," she said. "The whole messy, complicated, beautiful thing we call family." As we finished cleaning up and prepared to leave, I reflected on how much had changed since that awful night at her wedding. We'd both learned to see each other more clearly, to love each other more honestly. We'd accepted that our lives would look different, that we'd never be as close as we were as children. But that didn't mean we couldn't be close in new ways. "Want to grab dinner?" Sophia asked, as we loaded the last of the party supplies into her car. "There's a new place Marcus has been wanting to try. Nothing too fancy," she added quickly, then laughed at herself. "Sorry, I'm still learning how to not automatically assume you'll be uncomfortable with my suggestions." "I'd love dinner," I said. "And Soph, you don't have to apologize for who you are or what you like. Just like I don't have to apologize for who I am. We're different and that's okay." "When did you get so wise?" she asked, grinning. "Probably around the same time you got so successful," I replied. "We've both been growing, just in different directions." As we drove to the restaurant in separate cars, another small acknowledgement of our independent lives, I thought about the conversation I'd overheard at the wedding, about not belonging in her world. The truth was, I didn't belong in some parts of her world, and she didn't belong in some parts of mine, but we belonged in each other's lives, messy and imperfect as those lives might be. At dinner, over plates of food that was indeed fancier than my usual fare, we talked about everything and nothing: her pregnancy hopes, my relationship with James, Marcus Jr.'s dinosaur obsession, my latest patient success stories, her upcoming business trip, my plans to take some continuing education classes. It was the kind of conversation we'd been having more often lately, real and honest and comfortable. We were learning to be sisters again, not by going back to who we used to be, but by accepting who we'd become. "I love you, Maya," Sophia said as we were finishing dessert. "I know I haven't always shown it well, but I do. I'm proud of you and grateful for you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out how to say that." "I love you too," I replied, "and I'm proud of you too. Not just for your success, but for your willingness to work on us, to figure out how to be family in a new way. To new ways of being family," she said, raising her wine glass. "To new ways of being family," I agreed, clinking my water glass against hers. Outside the restaurant, before we headed to our respective cars and our respective lives, Sophia hugged me one more time. "Same time next week for coffee?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and I meant it. Not because I had to be there, not out of family obligation or guilt or the desperate need to hold on to something that no longer existed, but because I wanted to be there. Because this new version of our relationship, built on acceptance rather than expectation, understanding rather than assumption, was something worth nurturing. As I drove home to my small apartment and my simple life, I felt more at peace than I had in years. I'd found my way back to my sister, not by changing who I was or trying to fit into her world, but by accepting that love doesn't require sameness. It just requires honesty, effort, and the willingness to keep showing up for each other, imperfect as we are. Sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to let it break a little first, so it can heal stronger and more authentic than before. Sometimes the best way to find your way back to someone is to stop trying so hard to get there and just be present for the journey. We weren't the sisters we used to be, but we were the sisters we were meant to become, and that was enough. The baby shower was held in Sophia's backyard, under string lights and surrounded by flowers that she'd actually planted herself, a hobby she'd picked up during her pregnancy. The guest list was an interesting mix. Her work colleagues, some old friends, Marcus's family, neighbors, and me with James, who had indeed become a permanent fixture in my life. I was 7 months pregnant myself, a surprise that had delighted both Sophia and me. Our children would be cousins, only 4 months apart, growing up together in a way that might help them avoid some of the pitfalls Sophia and I had stumbled into. "I can't believe we're both going to be mothers," Sophia said, settling into the chair beside me, her hand resting on her very round belly. "A year ago, I wasn't sure we'd even be speaking regularly. A year ago, I thought you were planning to cut me out of your life entirely," I reminded her, then laughed. "And now we're pregnant at the same time, like some kind of weird sitcom plot." "The best kind of weird," she said, grinning. "Though I have to admit, I'm terrified about the whole working mother thing. How am I going to balance everything?" "The same way you balance everything else," I said, "with planning, determination, and the occasional complete breakdown followed by regrouping. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Meyer?" "That's my sisterly opinion, soon-to-be Mama Sophia." James appeared beside us with 2 glasses of sparkling cider and a concerned expression. "You two need to stay hydrated. And Maya, you've been on your feet too much today. Doctor's orders. He's very bossy when he's worried about me," I told Sophia fondly. "I like him," she replied, "not for the first time. He's good for you." It was true. James had turned out to be exactly what I needed. Someone who valued my work and supported my choices, who fit comfortably into my world while encouraging me to expand it. He'd proposed 3 months ago with a ring that was beautiful without being ostentatious, and we were planning a small wedding for the following spring. "Speaking of which," Sophia said, lowering her voice, "I have something to ask you. If it's about being your labor coach, the answer is absolutely not," I said quickly. "I love you, but I have limits." She laughed. "No, though I appreciate you setting boundaries. Actually, I was wondering, would you consider being my matron of honor? At the vow renewal Marcus and I are planning for our 2nd anniversary?" The question surprised me. "You're renewing your vows? It's only been a year." "I know it sounds silly, but the first wedding was so focused on the event, on impressing people and making everything look perfect. I want to do something smaller, more meaningful, just family and real friends. I want to celebrate the marriage, not just the wedding." I understood exactly what she meant. "And you want me to be your matron of honor?" "I want my sister to stand beside me when I marry the man I love," she said simply. "The real version this time, not the performance version." "Of course," I said, feeling tears threaten. "I'd be honored." "Good," she said, then grinned mischievously. "Because I already bought your dress. It's purple and it has room for your belly." "You bought my dress before asking me?" "I was confident you'd say yes." "We're getting pretty good at this sister thing." She was right. Over the past year, we developed our own rhythm, our own way of being family that worked for both of us. We had weekly coffee dates where we talked about everything from work stress to pregnancy symptoms to relationship dynamics. We included each other in our lives without trying to control or change each other. I'd learned to appreciate Sophia's drive and ambition without feeling diminished by it. She'd learned to value my choices and priorities without trying to fix them. We'd both learned that love doesn't require similarity, it just requires respect, effort, and showing up for each other consistently. Maya! Marcus Jr. came running over, now 9 and even more obsessed with dinosaurs. Aunt Maya, did you know that some dinosaurs were only as big as chickens? I did not know that, I said seriously. That's fascinating. Are you going to be a paleontologist when you grow up? Maybe. Or maybe a physical therapist like you. You help people walk again, which is pretty cool too. Sophia caught my eye and smiled. Marcus Jr. had become genuinely attached to me over the past year, and I discovered that I loved being an aunt. It was good practice for becoming a mother myself. As the afternoon wound down and guests began to leave, I helped Sophia clean up, our pregnant selves moving slowly but efficiently around her beautiful home. Thank you, she said as we finished loading the dishwasher, for everything today, but also for not giving up on us. Thank you for being willing to figure it out with me, I replied. For listening when I finally told you how I really felt, and for changing the things that needed changing. We both changed, she said. We both grew up. Later, as James and I drove home to our apartment, we'd be moving to a larger place before the baby came. I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in the past year. Not just the pregnancy or the engagement, but the restoration of my relationship with Sophia, the sense of peace I'd found with my choices, the confidence I'd gained in my own worth. Penny for your thoughts, James said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Just thinking about how this time last year, I felt so lost, I said. So unsure of my place in the world, especially in relation to Sophia. And now I know exactly who I am and where I belong. I belong with you, in our life together. I belong at work, helping people heal. I belong in Sophia's life as her sister, different but equal. I belong in this world we're all creating together. You've always belonged, James said gently. You just needed to stop trying to fit into spaces that weren't meant for you and start claiming the spaces that were. He was right, of course. The problem was never that I didn't belong. It was that I'd been trying to belong in the wrong way, trying to fit into a version of Sophia's life that didn't have room for who I really was. Once I'd accepted that our lives would look different, that our relationship would be different than it used to be, I'd been able to find my way back to her and to myself. That night, as I lay in bed with James's hand resting on my growing belly, I thought about the children Sophia and I were carrying, about the family we were creating for them. They'd grow up knowing that success could look different for different people, that love didn't require similarity, that family could be complicated and messy and beautiful all at the same time. They'd learn that sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to let it change, to stop trying to hold on to what was and start building what could be. They'd understand that belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about finding your place and claiming it with confidence and grace. Most importantly, they'd know that they were loved, not for who they were supposed to be, but for who they actually were. And maybe, with that foundation, they'd avoid some of the mistakes Sophia and I had made. Maybe they'd learn earlier that the goal isn't to be the same as the people you love. It's to love them well despite your differences. Or maybe they'd make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons, the way every generation does. But at least they'd have the example of two sisters who lost their way and found it again, who learned that family isn't about perfection. It's about persistence, forgiveness, and the willingness to keep trying until you get it right. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The wedding, where I'd felt so out of place, had been the catalyst for the most important conversation of my adult life. The night I'd overheard those painful words about not belonging had been the beginning of learning where I truly did belong. Sometimes the worst moments become the foundation for the best changes. Sometimes losing your way is the only way to find where you're really supposed to be. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone you love is the freedom to be different from you and the commitment to love them anyway.